Hello everyone, today I'm going to be showing you how to fix the carburetor on your 150 XRX Trailmaster go-kart. This little doom buggy here is something we purchased for the kids a while back, and it ran great for a while, but it sat in the shop, not the shop as in in getting it repaired, but shop out at our land. And it sat for years probably with never being cranked, so now it won't crank. I can put some engine starter in there, and it will fire up and it will run as long as that it's getting some of that ethanol from the fluid. But as soon as that ethanol burns out, it dies. So most likely what we have here is a clogged up carburetor jet. Right here is where the gas tank normally is. As you can see, I took the gas tank off, and if you look at this, there's no on or off on this one, but the petcock is not flowing. I mean, that tank's full of gas and no gas is coming out, so most likely I'm gonna have to clean that petcock out right there too. I'm not sure if it's if it's serviceable like some of the older ones you can take apart, but I'm gonna have to clean that somehow to make sure that it flows. But I'm also going to be cleaning out the carb, which is right here on this. This is a GY6 150cc motor, very common on these Chinese built go-karts, scooters, pretty much anything 150cc flying out of China is probably a GY6. So that's what this is mounted here. You have to pull this right here is the air cleaner, and I unbolted it. There's two bolts. There's a bolt right back here that I've already taken off. It was right here holding it onto the frame, and there was another small bolt right here at the front. So what that did is, by taking that off, that allowed me to pull the hose off the back of the carburetor, or I guess that would be the front, right, where the intake, the air intake, happens to go on to the carburetor. Then I'm going to have to take off this hose, which leads into the engine. I'm going to be taking that off. I've unscrewed it right here to get this off. Now I'm just going to pull this carburetor back. And what I need to get to is the bowl. The bowl underneath the carburetor is where the float and the jets are. And that is the most common, I would probably say 90% of the time, that's where your problem's going to be, is those jets are clogged up. Something, water contaminated the fuel, or fuel here in the U.S. has that ethanol in it. That stuff starts to gum up after a while when it's not being used, and that starts gumming up the ports. We put fuel stabilizer pretty much in all of our gas that goes into our smaller engines, but this thing has been sitting for so long that I'm sure the oil stabilizer couldn't even keep it going. So I'm going to take this piece off, and I will give you a video or show more of what that bowl and the carburetor looks like. I'll be back. Alright, so I pulled the carburetor back. As you can see, here it is. I don't want to unhook all the hoses and everything, because cleaning the jets is actually pretty simple. You just unscrew them, clean them out, spray it out with some carburetor cleaner, and put it back on. But basically, this is the bowl here, and the jets are going to be up underneath here. So I'm going to take these 4 screws out, pull the bowl off, set the bowl aside, and then I'm going to go underneath here and pull the jets out, clean out the float, and then put it back together, and hopefully that will fix the problem. And it's hard to do this with one hand, so I'm turning the video on and off, but I will get you some good shots of the inside of that carburetor, how to clean it. Alright, so in this instance I did actually take the bowl off. This is the bowl that goes on the bottom. You can see it has the hose that goes into the bottom of the bowl for the fuel. I took this off because when I popped it off the bottom of the carburetor, it's actually pretty gummy. It doesn't, you can feel where the fuel has kind of oiled up or gummed up on the bottom of this carburetor, which is obviously going to be the problem. But it felt so, I guess, bad that I decided since there is a hole at the bottom of this. If you can see it, that's the hose that I pulled off of the bowl. That since it was nasty like that, I pulled this off and I sprayed some carburetor cleaner. I usually just buy my carburetor cleaner at Walmart. Sorry, there's a couple places, you know, there are a lot of AutoZones, things like that. But this is $2 a can at Walmart. I think the last time I went to AutoZone or Advanced Auto, one of those places that needed some, they wanted like $5 a can. And I mean, all the stuff in there is the same. They're spraying the same stuff out the can. So not that I'm not a fan of Walmart, but certain things like this, I'll pick up 10 cans or something when I'm in there. And it's a decent value at that point. Like I said, you go to some of the other places and it's just ridiculously overpriced. So I understand they're specialty stores, but you know, come on already. Anyway, so I cleaned out the bowl. I'm going to put the bowl back on. There's a gasket that goes around it, but I'm not going to put it on yet. I'm going to put it back on. But I wanted to clean out this this fuel tube here, which goes into the bottom down of the bowl, and I sprayed that out real well, and it's flowing real good with carburetor cleaner. So now that that's done, I'm going to flip this over. Come on. And here's the jets and the float. The float is this thing here that moves up and down. There's a pin that's underneath there, a valve that opens and closes as this float moves with fuel. And then your two jets are those, there's one right here. This is one, and then there's another one down in this hole. And they have really tiny pinhole size holes in them to regulate the amount of fuel that's going through this carburetor. And they easily get clogged up. So again, this isn't a situation where, oh, I need to put another fuel filter on there, because this isn't dirty fuel that's causing this problem. It's fuel that's sitting. So if you have a piece of equipment that's got a gas engine on it, it's not as bad with diesel that I found. I don't really have this problem with my diesel engines, but with small gas engines where you're going to be putting unleaded fuel in there from the pump, I mean, it's got to be the additives and the garbage they're putting in the fuel that gums up. So again, if you see it, it's a little bit different color. I think the stabilizer we used was probably kind of a bluish color, but there's a little bit of a color to the fuel, and you can kind of see the remnants of it inside the carb there. But it still doesn't help when you're sitting with equipment this long. I mean, if you got a generator or anything like this and you let it sit for a couple years, well, this is most likely what's going to happen. So it's very common, and it's just something that if you have small engines, you might want to learn how to do. So, all right, I'm going to pull these jets out of here and the float off of there, and clean it up. The float is held on by just a straight pin. There's a pin that goes through this. It's not actually screwed in or anything. It's a free flowing pin, but you got to get something to push that pin through to pull this float off. And then don't lose the pin. You got to put the pin back on, and then the jets just unscrew with a flathead screwdriver. So I'm going to go ahead and take those out and clean them up. All right, so I got the jets out of there, and I sprayed that in good with carburetor cleaner. There's a couple little tools that I keep around, and they're very cheap when I'm working on carburetors. This here is a large paper clip, and this large paper clip lets you clean through holes that are this size. You know, you may want to have an assortment of paper clips, and I know it sounds kind of weird, but they work great. So I used this paper clip to actually push the little bar through to get the float off, which is in this cup. See that little bar? This paper clip pushed right through that hole with no problem to get that out. Then I have this really tiny piece of wire. It's hard to see here. This actually came out of a tie wrap, like you get off of a package of bread, a loaf of bread. There's a little thin piece of metal in there underneath that little paper or plastic outer covering, and it's very thin, and it probably doesn't focus well here, but it's just a very thin piece of wire. Well, when you're cleaning out jets on a carburetor, you're dealing with very small holes and openings, and you want a good variety of sizes of wire to be able to shove through those holes to make sure they're clean. That way when you spray the carburetor cleaner in there, it can actually penetrate through those holes and clean out well. So this one was relatively clogged up. I pushed the pins through everything, cleaned it up pretty good. As you can see, just the top of the jet is pretty dirty. I'm going to try to clean that off with a little wire brush just to clean it up pretty good. And I did the same thing with the other small, there's a little small screw hole down there. That was the top part of this jet that sticks out right here. That one actually has a hole down the middle, and it was completely closed. So it's probably where I had my problem, but it was completely closed, and I used this wire. I actually doubled up the wire and just threaded it through there back and forth many times to get that opening there, and then I was able to get carburetor cleaner through it, and it cleaned it quite well. So I'm pretty sure that that was the culprit of this thing not cranking, and I'm sure that the petcock's probably going to need to be cleaned. It might have some flow glowing through it, but it may be minimal. But that's the basics of your carburetor that you need to get in there and clean. So, you know, in some cases, you know, or if you just don't want to do this, you know, you can buy these carburetors online for 30 bucks on eBay or Amazon, something like that. The problem you're going to run into is they're not perfect. So since there is many different variations or small changes in the GY6 motor, like this one, again, this one's on a dune buggy, little small dune buggy go-kart. They have these in scooters, motorcycles. I mean, they just use them in miscellaneous either entertainment equipment, off-road equipment. They may even have them in certain pieces of work equipment. But the carburetors are not going to be 100% the same. So you may buy one that was meant to be on a scooter, and then you put it on your go-kart, and you may not get the same performance out of it. So personally, unless there's something wrong with the carburetor, I recommend cleaning it. If you need to replace it, great. They're cheap, 30 bucks. Sounds like it's a simple change, but if you're going to do that, you got to make sure you are getting the exact carburetor that you need for the piece of equipment you're putting it on. So that's just one thing to know. Don't just go order any GY6 carburetor. I mean, yeah, I mean, in general, they'll do pretty much the same thing, but you may get one that's got smaller jets or may not perform right. It may have more lower end, but, you know, no high end. Anyways, there's a lot of different variations on this carburetor, so just keep that in mind when you're saying, oh, I'm just going to replace it with another one. You need to make sure you're replacing it with the one that was meant to be on there. So but anyway, so that's it. That's basically the jets. I'm going to put all this back together after it's cleaned up. I'm going to put the jet back in, the jet reeds back in there, and put it back together, and should be able to fire it back up. So I'm going to do that now. All right, so I put it all back together, and again, it's not hard to put it all back together. I just reattach. There's 4 screws that go and put the bowl back on. You know, put the float and screwed back in the jets after cleaning them out real well. And you know, then I had to just back in reverse order. I put the bracket back on where it goes into the engine, and then I put the hose back on. As you can see, the band there where it goes to the airbox. Put the 2 screws for the airbox back in. Again, there's one right there. It was like a 1/2-inch screw on this one. I mean, 1/2-inch bolt here. That was a 10 millimeter for that one. I put the gas hoses back on I put the tank back and the gas hoses back on, as you can see. And earlier I was saying, you know, I didn't know, nothing was dripping out of the petcock, but that's the way it's supposed to work. It doesn't feed fuel in until there's a vacuum. But what I did to test it is I took the gas line off, which is the top one, and I left the vacuum line on, which is the bottom one, and I turned the engine over a few times, and man, it squirted fuel out like crazy. So the petcock was working pretty good. Filter over here seems to be in good shape. Gas was flowing through the filter good. So these are just little things that I was checking, but basically, I mean, I found my problem. You know, I know pretty much that was the problem. It had to have been when I pulled the jets off and found that one jet that was completely clogged. So that's where I used those little thin metal tools, like I said before. I ran the line through there, make sure that the holes and everything were open in the jets. And I think everything's good. I ran this thing over a few times, try to get fuel flowing, and let's go crank her up. So turn the key. I don't have the best battery. I put it on a battery charger, but I'm going to put the brake on for this one and try it. Wow, I didn't expect it to fire up that quick. I did turn it over a few times and I did hear it firing, but basically I needed to make sure that fuel was going all the way through those lines, and it's not going to fire up until you feel that bowl on the bottom of the carburetor. So basically the fuel's going to have to get sucked down, go through the fuel filter, go all the way down the hose into the bowl of the carburetor, and that's going to have to get filled up for the jets and everything to start working and start feeding in fuel. But the baby's purring, and this is pretty much what it used to sound like when it was nice and clean. So yeah, that was it. I mean, like I said, it's sad how much you can bet on what the problem's going to be. You're going to pull off that bowl, and this is with pretty much any carburetor that you touch that just has regular gas. I mean, same thing with my gas lawnmower, you know, generators, anything like that. You pull that bowl off, and you pull those jets out, and you run a piece of metal through them nice and clean, spray them out with some carb cleaner, and there's 90-95%, maybe even higher percent chance that that's going to be the problem. It's going to go through. It's that jet that gets clogged up that causes the problem. But yeah, this baby's purring just fine. I don't know, I can't remember, it's been so long since we ran this, if I need to do anything with the idle, but it seems to be idling okay. Yeah, that seems to be alright. And let me see if I give it some gas. I'm not in the cart, but it is in neutral. Wow. And that's it. There it is. It's always that carburetor. So if you got an electric vehicle, or like we have an electric mower, you're dealing with wires and batteries. And if you got a gas mower, you're dealing with carbs and gas. So there it is. Hope this video helps anybody that has these. Like I said, this isn't a go-kart, but that GY6 motor is used in a lot of different pieces of equipment, especially on these little off-road toys made in China. So I think the GY6 is basically a clone or a knocked off older version of a Honda engine. So alright, but that's it. I pulled the part, cleaned the jets out, and she's good to go. Hope that helps somebody. Y'all take care.